It is Wednesday, February 21st, and in the words of NBA analyst Jack Armstrong, let's start with a strong hello. This is the Sportsline Podcast on CHCH. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neil. Well, as you know, on this podcast, we generally shine the spotlight on the teams, athletes, officials, and executives that hail from Southern Ontario. But hopefully once a week, we like to highlight our very own at CHCH with the Sportsline Square Off. Well, this Hamiltonian and proud product of Cathedral High School here in Hamilton has proven that in the media business, you can always come home. After receiving an accounting diploma at Mohawk College, Jason Gaidola followed his true passion of being a broadcaster and learned the ropes at the College of Sports Media in the T-Dot. He put in his time and earned valuable mileage and experience in the Thunder Bay and Winnipeg markets before returning to Steeltown. We speak the same language of sports, and in many ways, it's kind of my favorite to the station. Jason Gaidola, awesome for you to be right here on the Sportsline couch.
Bubba, thanks for having me on. I mean, this is such a great platform, such a great show that you've been doing here, and I feel like, there's a lot of similarities, a lot of understanding of the business, and we have so many great chats about everyone's journey and into this line of work. And it's funny how you mentioned about I went from accounting to the sports and media industry, and then eventually into news media. And and you're right, I did follow my dream. I just said, you know what, accounting was like valuable skills to obtain, valuable education to obtain, but I'm like, I got to do something that's a little more daring, because I want to live a more exciting life, and this has been an exciting line of work. And it's been very fulfilling, and came in full circle now that I'm back home, because the goal was always to be either back home or at least in the greater Toronto, Hamilton area.
Well, and that's it, as you well know, it's so difficult to get back home in so many occasions and be in this tough Southern Ontario market, which is the biggest in the country. But you've certainly rounded out your resume, and you do have a passion for sports. You have filled in on the sports desk. You've done the hard news stories as well, too. But I've also noticed that you kind of like a business of sports stuff.
Love it. A lot of that came through my first internship, actually, which was at Rogers Sportsnet. And right out of when I left the College of Sports Media, I got into the business that way, and it came off working on Bob McCown's show, Primetime Sports, one of the most revered radio shows ever, and it was just such a valuable experience, just listening to Bob for 3 hours. And I ran the B-roll for the simulcast for the TV portion of the show, and every day for 3 hours, it didn't matter. I could sit there and listen to the whole show because of Bob, the way he delivered his opinions, the way he kind of highlighted things in the business, because that's what he dealt with. He always looked at the business of sports and how it really impact the product that we see today, and also to the guests that he had.
No doubt.
It's you don't see those kind of guests on any Canadian platform, at least to that degree. You know, Bob Ryan from the Boston Globe and so on. Those are some huge names. And every day I was behind the glass watching that show. I was never bored. It was never bored, and it was the best. That was probably one of my most favorite jobs that I've had.
Isn't it amazing? And I've said this to young broadcasters, and in this business, we speak. Yeah. We enunciate, we talk, we project, we do all these things. But I've also told a lot of these students and even any younger, older people that want to get in the business, you know what the best skill actually might be? Not talking, just listening.
Exactly. And it's funny enough, because in my head, I nitpick on that when I listen to the radio. It's like, and I'm not going to name names, but sometimes I do hear where the host is talking more than the guests. I'm like, no, you're supposed to let the guests talk, set them up. And I understand hosts want to get their opinion out and be more
provocative.
Not just provocative, but you want to be able to sell your own brand, where you want people to tune into you, and I get that portion. But it's all about highlighting your guests, and it's all about trying to get as much insight. That's what drives myself to tune into somebody, is insight. Tell me something I don't know. Tell me something or that I want to know, as closest to the truth as you can get, because that's the essence of why we tune into any sort of content, any sort of, whether it's in a podcast form or just anybody who's interesting. Give us something that we don't really hear very often, or at least, or maybe we're thinking this is, hey, there's something might be there. Is this true? Give us the background. Tell us your side. And that's what makes this job so great.
It's funny you say the word background because it just triggered something for me here. Because this has been a point of contention for many here at this station. Not to embarrass you, but this is an opportunity for you to lay the law down straight. Okay? What is the proper pronunciation of your last name? And I want to say that because you know what triggered this is that Hyunjin Ryu has signed a contract. He's going to Japan. He's no longer the Blue Jays. Blue Jays left-hander being spent a lot of money over a decade in the major leagues. But upon leaving for Asia, he has now told everyone that his name is actually pronounced Hyunjin Liu, not Ryu. Really? It took over a decade for him to reveal that to us. So on that note, Jason
Gaidola.
Thank you.
That's no, I think, and
we've heard several different types.
There's been times where people would say either Gaidola or Gaidola. My old football coach used to say that. He'd be like, "Oh, Gaidola," because it rolled off the tongue a lot easier, and I never corrected it. I guess I'm kind of like, that's why I kind of, when I first heard about Tyrod Taylor, when he first corrected people, I'm like, I kind of get what he's saying. It's like, I'm not going to correct it, but one day he's just like, hey, by the way, it's this. But
thank you. We appreciate it. We've heard like Gardolski.
I don't know. I forget
the Polish version.
I don't know how that came through. Adam Atkinson, it had to come, like it came from him. I don't know what spawned the genesis of that nickname, but I don't have an issue with that. I'm like, yeah, sure, it's a nickname. Like, I don't know what it means.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing Polish about me, if that's what people are wondering, but it sounds good,
right?
It's got some pizzazz, so I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's roll with it.
Just wanted to clarify that. Now that we've clarified that, you ready to talk some sports?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Let's get busy, folks, into the sports line square off. And folks, let's get into, you see the topic bar. That's what we're going to square off about for the next half an hour or so. Auston Matthews likely to score his 50th goal of the season tonight when those Maple Leafs face the Coyotes tonight in Arizona. He's on pace for 74. That's what they have it mathematically broken down to. Now, if he does so, should he win NHL MVP over the likes of McDavid, Kucherov? Now, those guys are going to likely finish with more points. They certainly have more assists than Auston Matthews. So who would you give that MVP to?
Well, at this point, I think this is what makes this the Hart Trophy conversation or any MVP conversation as interesting as possible. Where now it's like, he has to be in the conversation, definitely. But at the point, this is like, let's see how the regular season plays out. And this also kind of gives the value to the regular season a little more. But I'm sure voters are going to be wondering, how, like, it's not like the old days where it was just like Gretzky and Lemieux were winning consecutive Hart trophies. Now it's like you have this variety. Are voters going to have different reasons to vote for somebody depending on how their team has done through this regular season? But I do think he does deserve to be in that conversation, just the simple fact where it wasn't too long ago where the Leafs were just kind of hovering around that, outside the playoff mark. And now they're back. Now they're third again in their division, and they look like they're solidifying themselves to the point where they're staying away from that bubble, getting outside that bubble. So he has to be a part of that conversation. Now, in terms of winning it, this is where people or voters have to start asking themselves, what should constitute somebody winning the MVP when you're in a situation like this? Because you have so many great players, and
most valuable player though.
Who has impacted his team the most? And it's tough to say. I mean, 74 goals. He's getting close to your buddy McGillney there back in 92. Like, that's not many guys get up to that. Like, that's like, it is an outlier year, and that is definitely going to play a role. And especially the way the Leafs are trajectorying down the stretch. But I think it's going to come down to how each team finishes at the end of that regular season. And
let me not interrupt, but let me just use your same mentality there, because let's not forget, I should say, that the Edmonton Oilers were the last place team in the league. They won 3, I think, of their first 13 games. They fired their head coach. Connor McDavid was nowhere to be found on the top 20 scoring list, and then he got hot. right? And now he's not going to score 74 goals, but he may finish with 150 points based on that same argument that you're saying of how your team could do, because it looks like the Oilers, the way they're going, they may threaten for at least a top 3 place in the Western Conference. And that's why I think it gets all convoluted and kind of crazy with, what's more valuable, 74 goals or 150 points?
And that's a valid point. And it looks like McDavid will likely get to, it's more likely that McDavid will get there than I think Matthews will get to 74 or somewhere in the mid 70s, right? Because you never know. You can go through a dry spell from a goal scoring perspective. So he has to be in the conversation though. And at this point, there's so many good options out there, viable options to win that award.
Kucherov. Everyone said Tampa Bay's done. They're old. They're right there again.
I just think it's impossible to declare an absolute front runner, but you can definitely start declaring who's going to be the candidates right now. And you can kind of, I think we're reaching that point of the season. We're almost in March. You can kind of already get your 4 or 5 players that are going to be running for that awards.
Can't forget McKinnon as well too. He's having an outstanding season as well too with the Colorado Avalanche. Hey, now sticking with the Maple Leafs, they're 19-2-1 over their past 2 seasons without Morgan Rielly in the lineup, for whether it be suspension issues as he is right now or injury issues. Should the veteran defenseman be dealt? Is he trade bait for somewhere else? Because the Leafs seem to not miss him. In fact, it could be argued, Jason, they play a better defensive style, more to what their head coach wants, when their top defenseman's not there.
Exactly, and that's another great point. The question is, and I think the Leafs are the management looks a little more pragmatic, so there probably is going to be some hard choices if you think you can make an upgrade, depending on what you can get from Morgan Rielly, which I'm assuming you can probably get something for him. It would be hard to deal him because he's one of the elder statesmen, only at age 29. Mm-hmm. He's one of the elder statesmen, and he's kind of been committed. He seems like a guy to be committed to the club. But you look at his contract. He signed an 8-year deal. It was a $7.5 million cap hit. These are some things to consider where he may be looked at as a business move. And is your goaltending situation solidified? And you just laid out the record itself. I wouldn't be so. I don't think he'd be missed, but he wouldn't really be that missed if it came down to saying, you know what, I think we can make a move here and make a run for the Stanley Cup. Because if that were to happen, I'm sure Leaf fans are hoping for that.
I think they'd lose their mind.
They lose, and right? Morgan Rielly being on the team would be an afterthought. So I could see. I definitely do believe there's going to be some hard moves. At least one hard move made at the deadline, whether it's Morgan Rielly or not. It's somebody's going to go. Somebody's going to go, and again, it's not because they're not a great player, but sometimes it's just time for a little bit of an identity change, especially when you're going through to the playoffs, a place where the Leafs have kind of struggled to really etch themselves in.
And let's not forget, too, we've talked about this before when new management comes in. Brad Treliving owes nobody anything, right? Like, he's there to win, right? The previous management that was there, they were all together. Some would say it was a bit of a boys' club. But Brad Treliving wants to win, and he is not buddies with anyone right now. And I know he's got some guys like Chris Tanev, Hanifin, guys that he's trusted in the past with Calgary that maybe be valuable to him right now and might cost a little less than Morgan Rielly. And when you say Morgan Rielly trade, it does sound crazy, but as they get to that playoffs, Morgan Rielly's been there for a lot of bad times when it comes to postseason play, and I don't know. And as we talked about that 19-2-1 record, it's interesting to me that they are that good or seem to adopt a better style of play, or at least a more winning style of play, and keeping the puck out of your own net when Morgan's not there. Yeah, and this is, I think, and we're kind of skating in that conversation where a franchise reaches a point where you have a player who's been a cornerstone for you for an X amount of time, and are you going to make a business decision, or are you going to stick by him due to loyalty? They're kind of at the crossroads. They might be at the crossroads with Morgan, and I'm not saying he's not an effective player, but you could be better without him. And
the Leafs are probably someone. If there's someone's going to make a hard choice, it's obviously going to be Brad. So he could be on his. I could definitely see him being a piece being moved out by trade deadline. I'm not saying for sure, but he definitely could be one of the casualties.
I'm sure the deal would have to be right. All the everything would have to maybe even get some draft equity back because the Leafs have no draft picks really in the future. Like they've really maxed out that way in terms of giving away first round draft picks for what they would deem veteran like players, but. I don't know. I think it's an interesting discussion. Let's go over to the hoop and to the hardwood. And this is something that I think has got a lot of people talking about the NBA right now. No less than 6 scoring and shooting records were broken as the East beat the West 211, 186 at last weekend's NBA All-Star Game. Straight up, and we can go in all kinds of directions here. Has this event become unwatchable?
I mean, I think it's no different than, say, like the NHL All-Star Game. Let's obviously minus baseball because there's something at stake there. But the same thing like the Pro Bowl. We are reaching that era where like it's just not compelling anymore. And it is on the players, but at the same time, it's like, well, I mean. It's human nature for them not to give it their all at these events.
Isn't it the other way? You're an athlete. Don't you want to compete?
I think there's something in the back of their mind. There's so much distraction, and I'm not saying don't have the and we've had this discussion before. I'm not saying don't have the All-Star weekend. You're going to have to do it a little differently, like whether it's more skills showcases and stuff like that, or more. I think it's a good weekend to have for the stars of the league to go to the host city and to put on the event and just get out there with the fans and kind of really bridge that relationship or bond and forge that bond, I guess, with the fans.
But you're right there. But here's this: LeBron James, is he the biggest star of the game? Probably. Because we put him in the GOAT category. He's arguably, right?
Well, I don't put him in the GOAT category.
I mean, I know maybe you don't, but I mean, it's worth a discussion if he's one of the GOATs. But he shows up on a plane. Right? And plays 10 minutes. Like he wasn't even there for the whole weekend. He showed up on a plane on Sunday and played 10 minutes. And I mean, you've got guys like Scotty Barnes. I've done a lot of, I hate to say this, I lost a lot of respect for Scotty Barnes. Watching him just kind of in his part of the All-Star weekend, just kind of moping around. Like he's a first-time All-Star. Wow. If you were a first-time All-Star, wouldn't you be busting your butt to show off all your skills? He's just kind of like, I don't know, there's like this self-entitlement of these guys. And now we're hearing Sam Amick, one of the NBA insiders, is talking about that the players actually kind of have talked about not playing any defense in that game. And let's see how many shots we can put up, like, and how high the score can go. Like, I don't know. But
here's the thing, though. It is on the players, and because they're the ones out there playing the game. But but when I'm saying it's human nature, it's just human nature. I mean, in terms of like they make more money than they've ever made before. They're already used to probably a scheduling when it comes to load management where they're taking nights off. Their body is their investment. And I get all that. I just think that when it comes to the game itself, the NBA and the NHL, and this goes for all the other leagues and the NFL, and I think the NFL is already showing it where they kind of did a more skills thing. You're just gonna have to make it a more showcasey event where you try to leave as little risk as possible. Now, if you want to talk about like guys not competing in the slam dunk competition, I think that's another discussion too. And I'm not trying to veer it too much here, but I think you just got to do something a little different and a little more. I think players deserve a lot more criticism for them not competing in the skills because you're not really going. You're not banging. Bodies are not banging in there as much. Because you're not going head to head.
Well, you heard what Stephen A. Smith said a couple of days ago is that the person to ruin the slam dunk contest is LeBron James. He's never competed in that contest.
Yeah, and I think you can kind of criticize him. And trust me, there's a lot. I think there's a lot to criticize about LeBron. But when it comes to the dunk contest, I'm like. He was more of a power dunker. He's not really a showcase dunker, the Vince Carters of the world. And I also think it's also the style of play. Like, you don't see highlight dunks as much anymore. you don't really see. It's not like the old days when you had, Jordan's going over like 7-footers, and Vince Carter is even going over a 7-footer and dunking over.
The French guy.
The French. Like, you don't see that anymore, and I think, and it's become, and maybe I'm singling out the dunk competition here, but you just don't see that style of play anymore, and it's clearly showing in the product. In certain aspects of the All-Star weekend.
I think you got to have some pride, because we talk about offense being an amazing part of all sports, and the fact that the rules nowadays in sports are pushing towards, and this isn't football, this isn't hockey and basketball, that they're playing to having more offense because they believe people want more scoring. I'm not quite sure about that. I think defense is an important part of all games, all sport, and you know what? I think of the NBA All-Star game, and I have memories of that 50th All-Star game in Washington, watching the likes of Kobe Bryant and Stephon Marbury going wild, going shot for shot in the final minute of the game. I think of the likes of, do you remember the amazing, and there's some great photos of watching Kobe Bryant looking to defend Michael Jordan and vice versa.
It was crazy.
And the intensity was so amazing. And you only get that in All-Star games where they're having a little fun, but there's a respectful, well, you can't, you're not going to beat me. And I just miss that, and I sit there and I say, what is it? Like, the NHL are giving more money. There's $1 million to the winner of the three. Like, how much more money do you want? 100,000 in this game, in that All-Star game, how many points were scored? The winner got 100,000 and the losers got 25 grand.
I don't think that's not going to change it, because they already make such way more money playing their everyday games. And it's, again, it goes down to the pride. I'm sorry, but the old timers, they just took more pride in the game. Mm-hmm. By the way, and I just want to point this out on a side note. This didn't really make headwaves on media. But did you see what Kawhi Leonard said? When he was getting asked questions at All-Star Weekend, and somebody proposed a 4-point line, and then he just says, and he brushed that off, and he's just like, no, the game has lost its fundamentals.
Wow,
he said that, and I saw that I saw that today, and I'm like, this is Kawhi Leonard, who I think is the best basketball player right now. His game is on point, but the point I'm trying to get here is that he's one of the very few that are that really take pride in the intricacies of the game of basketball, kind of like what Kobe did.
He plays defense.
Yeah.
He can block shots. He never gives up on a ball. No. Yeah, he can shoot a 3 ball. He can shoot the long range 2, but he likes to drive to the basketball, and maybe that goes to the fundamentals that you're talking about.
Yeah, well, and it's just, but it's the pride, it's the work, it's the somebody like Kawhi Leonard. He seems like a guy who just loves going to practice and going to work. Mm-hmm. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, all these, that's what they did. They lived in the gym. They lived it, and they did it every day. And I don't know. That has to be something from the inside that you got to do. And that's not something you can really teach or incentivize. It's got to be in you.
Former NBA All-Star, we just talked about him, Stephon Marbury, says that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Hamilton product, is already the best basketball player of all time from Canada. Now, when asked about that during All-Star weekend, Shai responded that, well, he's got a long way to go to catch Steve Nash. But I'm going to ask you, Jason, does he?
Well, he's definitely on the right track, and I just want to say I love Stephon Marbury. I love his candidacy. He just keeps it 100, and he's kind of reminds me of that Allen Iverson type. Mm-hmm. But I know what he's trying to. I think I know what he's trying to say. Now, if you want to talk about, and this is the difference between, because Nash is already going to be a Hall of Famer, and you're talking about somebody who's his accolades and his statistics. Was a 5-time leader of assists per season. How many times has he been in the 50-40 club? That kind of efficiency. Obviously, 2-time MVP. But I think what Marbury was probably getting at is that in terms of just, there's a difference between impact, what you did, and talent. Now, if you look from a talent point of view, mm-hmm. I think Shai is probably the most more talented Canadian. Probably. But there's obviously a lot of work that's got to be done. You got to win. You got to win. You got to sustain a level of greatness. But he's definitely on that track right now. And also, too, they're also different. And this is going back to the game now and to the game then. Steve Nash is one of the last quintessential point guards that you've seen. Like he's still that old school mentality where the point guard was really there running the point. He's running the floor. Pass first. You don't see guys like that anymore. And usually the top players, the top scorers, they're also the ball handlers now. And we're just in a different era where it's becoming harder and harder to compare these great players. And I think that's the bottom line. But in terms of just like if you isolate them in a vacuum, sure, Shea is definitely more gifted than Steve. I don't know if more gifted, but I think he has more skills, a more repertoire
I'm with
skills.
You. I'm with you. There's a dirty work aspect to Steve Nash's game that we don't know if we've seen that from Shea or if that's really necessary in today's NBA game. But let me throw you this bone here. Now both have not won a championship, right? No. And you're right. Nash, 2-time NBA MVP, and one of the years he beat Shaq doing so, and Shaq cried about it. But it's funny to think about the fact that Shea, it's real close right now. Like, he's probably second in MVP voting if you put pen to paper right now. He was top 5 last year. He's getting there. But if Canada is on the podium because of Shea Gilgeous-Alexander in the Olympics, something that Steve Nash could only get Canada to 7th. Now, granted, that team was nowhere near as talented as what Canada basketball is right now. But I'm telling you, if Canada were to win a gold medal, because I already in my mind, I'm dreaming of prospects of possibly seeing Canada play United States in what could be a medal game in the Olympics coming up this summer. If Shea leads Canada to a big medal, maybe a gold medal,
I think we can have a conversation then there. Definitely, because, and also too, this is like I don't think there's a better time for Canada to kind of really start blazing themselves into the scene here and attacking USA, because I still think USA, there's a little bit of vulnerability because they're not like the powerhouse that they used to. You can get them now. This is there's blood in the water where it's like, oh my God, you can actually have these guys because other nations have shown to beat them. And and obviously there's an element of maybe guys from the Americans are not putting as much effort in these international competitions. You can make that argument, but I don't think there's a better time now for a nation like Canada, who's finally starting to ascend among the top teams, top nations. This is the time now, and I think Shea realizes that. If I were to take an assumption there, but if he ever led Canada to a title, then I definitely want to have that. I'll definitely have that conversation.
Well, I mean, you think about the best players in the NBA right now, and you think Giannis is technically he's from from Greece, pardon me. You look at Luka and Jokic, these are players that are not American. I don't even know who the best American player is right now. An old Kevin Durant.
Well, probably Kawhi Leonard. I would just probably,
I'd probably just go. But older players as well too can't even play like a whole season, right? We're looking at some older guys right now that I don't know how they fare in a tough 7-game tournament like the Olympics could be.
No, sorry. Now that was going to be my next question. You're referring to like Olympics, right? Like an Olympic gold. Yes. I thought maybe you were referring to like FIBA World Cup, because the thing about the Olympics is that I feel like the NBA players are more excited to go to the Olympics due to the exposure and the the possibilities to really enhance their brand. Like, everybody wants to be at the Olympics, so that would probably be you never know, man. Like, I think it's going to be a great basketball tournament this summer.
Last week, the Professional Women's Hockey League broke an attendance record for women's hockey. I'm going to ask you this because we've talked about this before. Is this league destined for greatness, or are there still some concerns over sustaining its current momentum, Jason?
I'm going to quote Don Cherry, I'm going to get a lot of trouble for saying this, but no.
Just tell me how you feel.
No. Well, listen, destined for greatness, I mean, in terms of viability, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know. We don't know. And the reason why I say that is because I just look at because of the sports market. Today we're just flooded with so many options. I think it's hard to say because they're in a honeymoon phase right now, which is great, and you got to build off that. But just based off history, I'm going to reserve an opinion on whether I think it's going to be destined for greatness in terms of viability, having a sustained success, because I really think that the female athletes, they just want to know, we just want to play hockey for a living. And there's a shot there. And I don't think you can get a better start than what the league has had compared to the other startups that happened. If you look at the way the product launch, and you got to be able to look at how you scale your product, right? You only start off with a few teams. You start off with a great night. Again, that product launch, it's a league that looks like it's run by women, made by women. I think they're off to as best a start as you can to put themselves in position to succeed. How they scaled it, they're in arenas where they can fill it in right away. And obviously you had and if there is the opportunity to fill in a bigger arena, depending on if there's that rivalry like Toronto and Montreal, you could sell that. And they're on the right. I will say though, they're on the right track. And also too, I mean, in a sports market, you want to be able to get, especially when you're new, you got to do well at the gate. And right now, I think there's a lot of sports fans, families, they're looking for that right, affordable option.
Yes.
To go watch hockey, and they're doing it right. I think I saw tickets. The next Toronto game was in Ottawa, $25. That's very affordable. That could be attractive to families. Say, you know what, I'm going to take my kids to this game, right? So they're on the right track in terms of destined for greatness. I don't know. That's hard to say. I mean, we'll have to see maybe 5 years from now. But do I think it's going to be around the next 5 years? Absolutely.
You do think it'll be around 5 years from now?
I would probably say yes. Yeah. I think there's enough money to have that. Even if they just say theoretically they were going to lose money for 4 years, I think there's a commitment to go at least 5 years, maybe more. But who knows? I mean, they had the way they branded the teams. They haven't given them any nicknames. They haven't given them any identities. I don't know if they're really waiting for somebody with deeper pockets to come around and invest, whether the NHL.
The National Hockey League?
National Hockey League. I don't know. I think they're just leaving that door open, and maybe that's why they've kind of left the product the way it is. But I don't think you can ask for a better start to a sports league than what you're seeing now. But yeah, but you never know. It's again.
But what's scary? I sense a little. There's something scaring you. What is it?
No, just based off there's been other leagues that have failed. It's hard to start a sports league, right?
I just think there's an unserved market here. And this is a market that have been waiting. And whether it be young women, older women, women that love sports, they're growing. Let's be honest. Canada is not, I don't think it's to where United States is right now. But I think there was a time, especially when I was much younger, where girls didn't play a lot of sports. And I'm saying young girls didn't play a lot of sports. I think that's changed right now. And the broad scope of the amount of sports that women are playing right now has certainly increased right now. And I think this is an unserved market. I think it's great that all three sports television networks in this country have jumped aboard, that being TSN, Sportsnet, and CBC are showing games right now. I just think these crowds that they're getting, I don't think it's fake. Toronto are sold out for the season. Now, I didn't expect them to sell out in basically half an hour to play at Scotiabank Arena. A good test might be they're doing another sort of big stadium series game in a couple of weeks where Toronto will play Montreal I think it's in Pittsburgh.
Oh, the NHL Stadium Series.
Yeah, the NHL Stadium Series, but for the women that are going to play in these bigger stadiums. Now, obviously, when you think about it, a game like that in Toronto is a slam dunk. I think you have to say that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right? And I think these one-off games where I know they play at the Mattamy Athletic Center, the old Maple Leaf Gardens. Yeah. Perfect venue for your everyday games. But if you can kind of showcase some games of the week and you can have it at a bigger venue, you can tailor it that way. And I think and also to the demand. I mean, I totally understand the social friction behind whether people want to watch women's sports or not. I mean, but now I think this is the best way to do it is when you have a league that's, again, run by women and performed by women. This is the way that it's going to be successful as the best position to be successful. When you have another corporate entity coming through, relying on the NHL to do it, you could run into some problems. But now that they're forging their own identity, you can frame this product how you like it, right? And the way you can, how you schedule it, how you promote it, and it helps too that like you said, the media is starting to get on. There's more investment into it. They're off. I think they're off to as best of start than you can hope for.
Last thing on this topic. And I know that you're a big soccer fan as well, too. And they are desperately trying and in the works right now as we speak to getting a Canadian domestic women's soccer league going right now. Some former players from the Canadian national team, Wilkinson, I believe, being one of them, putting this all together. Do you see this being sustained success? Is the sport of soccer big enough at this level in this country for this to work?
I think this goes back to me questioning how you scale your product. Like right now, you have to look at the talent pool. Is the talent pool big enough to where you can know that you can put up a great product across the board, from every team, basically? You know, you don't want a big drop off on your talent pool on certain teams, and then you start seeing blowouts, and that could really turn people off. So, a Canadian domestic league, that could be. I think that might be a little much, but that doesn't mean you can't have Canadian clubs competing with in some of the American leagues. I think there should be investment into forming Canadian clubs to go play like a lot, either the HLs, like kind of like the MLS in that regard.
But in the NWSL,
we should sure there should be if you can form. I think you should start forming clubs to go represent those leagues. Plus, I think the way you can sell it to Canadians as a Canadian, because I know Canadians can be very fickle when it comes to consuming sports and everything. When you start tying in that American versus Canada element, that seems to sell in this country. So, and you know, when TFC won the MLS Cup, I mean that was bonkers.
Yeah, it was wild.
That was bonkers. And you know, when the Raptors won the NBA championship, that was bonkers because deep in our soul, that was a national thing. And I think if you just keep that formula for whether it's for Canadians, you can. I think you have a better shot at succeeding than doing something as wholly domestic. Because, what we're seeing with the CPL, they're off to a great start, but now they're kind of cooled off a little bit. I mean, there's a following. I just think certain, you know, I'm going to criticize Canadians, and you know, especially in Toronto, they just don't. I feel like there's certain markets they just don't associate with the rest of Canada. And they just be all about themselves. And that's just my take on it.
Fair.
But that doesn't mean we can't have Canadian clubs. So I believe that's the route they should go.
This blew me away. The National Football League have allowed owners to own up to 5% of any sports wagering company. So there's investment there. Now, with that said, league personnel are prohibited, and league personnel are players as well, too, are prohibited from placing or soliciting or facilitating any type of bet. Are we risking public trust right here by allowing owners to have a stake or a chunk in wagering companies, Jason?
Well, I think this is already kind of happening already. Like I know that I'm been aware that the NBA is starting to work with the bookmakers in terms of because the leagues are preparing themselves for this new era where now it's going to be all about betting, and that's where they're going to. I'm not saying TV is going to be an important priority, but the betting apps are going to be the real priority because they know that's where the money is. Is it going to in terms of public trust? I'm sorry to say, but I think we're headed down a dark road in this respect, in the fact that if the leagues are starting to have direct access to the bookmakers, knowing their checks and balances, even on because there's the lines move minute by minute, second by second as the game unfolds, that could lead to some uncomfortable conversations if people are privy on what's happening and knowing how much money's coming in and how much money's going out, all in real time. And I think it's in terms of public trust. If you're talking about trusting the product, I think there is going to be some broken trust there because you know all of a sudden it's like, hey, this team's up by 20 points, and then all of a sudden other teams are taking foot off the gas and they're going to the free throw line like quite often in the last 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden there's a backdoor cover. I don't know, I don't know. I'm just saying. I've just only because I do participate as well, and I've seen some very odd things. So
the crazy thing is, and again, you're well versed in all sports. You're a sports guy. I am not. I don't wager, and you know that about myself. But I will say this to people out there, and I'm going to shock a lot of people by saying this, and you know this to be true. there are people that you watch in this industry, people you listen to on the radio in this industry, people you listen to on podcasts. Most sports journalists, reporters, etc., like to sprinkle a little money down when it comes to sports wagering. You would be stunned how much this is a part of our business. I choose to stay out. It's just a personal thing for me. No, but totally. Would you not agree with me? Well, not.
Absolutely, and I've already seen it. I've already seen certain sports media personalities openly admit on social media, they
don't have to hide anymore.
They don't have to hide anymore, and it's because it's not black market anymore. It's now been fully accepted, fully integrated into the viewership, and I think it's a very noble thing for someone not to partake in it. But however, I just think that there's got to be. It's not going away. There's got to be fans are just going to have to reconcile whether you're for it or against it. You're going to have to reconcile that. It's going to have to coexist. However, I will say there is an element to it they want it because people are engaged. It's going to keep people's eyes on the screen. This goes back to that conversation. Mm-hmm. If the PWHL wants to be successful, you might want to start maybe opening up the lines there for people to get. I mean, that's probably going to help. I'm not going to lie to you. So I think the problem is you have to find a way to able to harness it. And but in terms of like when the leagues are getting direct equity and direct stake in it, this is where there's going to be some tough reaction there.
Because the National Football League for so long, Roger Goodell has spent a lot of his tenure as the commissioner saying that we will never be involved in gambling and betting. We look down upon gambling and betting. They have punished, look at what they did last year. They punished 5 players in a month. They just however they found out, punished them. One of them sat for a year, right? You're suspended for a year. You can't do this. Yeah. Right? Like they have been, and they're telling their people, you can't gamble, but you owners, you can have a little piece, or you can have a financial investment in it. It's two-faced to me.
This is the sad and as I was driving into work today, I'm thinking, this is the exact scenario of like someone working in a restaurant, but you can't eat the food. The bosses don't want you eating the food, right? Because they want you altering anything. And now, and for the first time ever, this is almost like athletes being treated as employees and not contractors on their job, because you can't get involved in this line of business. Obviously, because because of insight, it's kind of like inside trading and stock, I guess, if you want to, the closest way to kind of find a comparison to here. But and I get all that. Now, should athletes bet on other sports? I don't see the problem there, but in terms of their own sport, letting a bet, it is going to be problematic, and maybe other people feel differently, where these athletes should do whatever they want. We're used to saying that, but I do think there's certain things you just don't mess with people's money, right? And they know that there's serious money there. If there's any chance where someone else can alter it, you're going to have some big problems. But yeah, I think that's how I equate it. It's like you're looking at more like an employee, in the restaurant. You don't eat the food, because that's our inventory. We got to sell that. Well,
we got a guy that may be one of the best ever in their sports, and they have not been allowed, for 40 years now, to be a part of their Hall of Fame. It's crazy when I think about it.
Well, and it's some of the, Mr. Rose himself. Yeah, it's that one. That's a tough one, right? If you're going to take away,
never bet on his team.
Never bet on his team. Yeah, that's a tough one. Mm-hmm. If you look back, maybe at that time, everyone was just like, yep, Pete, you were wrong. This is totally wrong. Here's your punishment. But now that you look back, it's like, I don't know.
I agree with you. Hey, Jay, this has been a lot of fun. A lot of fun to talk some sports with you, and I'm glad you appreciated the topics and your insight. I really respect, and it's great having conversations on this kind of platform. So thank you so much for joining the Sportsline Podcast.
I appreciate it. Happy to be here.
All right, and we'll see you again. Hey, folks, that is your Sportsline Podcast for the day. And again, as you've just seen and heard, we love talking sports. Please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe button so we can hear what you've got to say, as well too, as much as what Jason's got to say and what I got to say. Please comment if you have the opportunity to do so. For the wonderful people that make the Sportsline Podcast possible, we thank you. And we'll see you with another hard-hitting show tomorrow.